Hello and welcome to Definitely Not a Mimic, your D&D and TTRPG podcast. I'm Zill from the Twisted Pint Tavern.
I'm Jacob Crowe from the Crow's Perch.
And I'm Loot from the Loot Goblin Marketplace.
On today's episode, we will be talking about Baldur's Gate 3 and some of its connections to D&D. So without further ado, let's get started.
Let's go, gamers. Let's just jump into it.
Let's just jump into it, dude. Baldur's Gate 3. Crowe, your thoughts?
I have a really controversial take on Baldur's Gate 3. It's a good game. Yeah,
solid.
good game. Good game. Good game is good. Good game. It's really difficult to be able to find anything to bitch about it. It just seems like it is incredibly solid. It's a massive improvement from what they got going on from Divinity Original Sin 2, if any of you guys are familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I've played a little bit in the past.
Mm-hmm. How far did you get to? Did you play it? Did you finish it?
Well, that's kind of the problem. It's the same problem I have with Baldur's Gate 3. Every time I had to do a new playthrough with different people, and I never end up finishing one,
It's just like a normal D&D game. Damn.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's something I'm noticing it's happening as well whenever I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 is I'm running into the exact same kind of issues I'd run into when running a D&D game. It's like, I start out strong with a bunch of people I want to play with, and then next week we try to meet up, and then...
Bro, we even had, in the game that I play with my brother and one of our friends, one of their work friends was like, hey, I play Baldur's Gate, you play Baldur's Gate, can I hop in with you for a little bit? We were like, yeah, sure, that'd be great.
You made the terrible mistake of saying yes.
Yeah, and he joins us. And the thing is, it wasn't a terrible mistake because he wasn't fun to play with. We had fun playing with the guy, but, he works at a restaurant, the same restaurant that my brother works at. Clearly, their schedules are going to be conflicting a lot. So it's like, we're not going to be able to have him in hardly at all. And then we go to remove him, and we can't because they just, like a couple days ago, came out with that patch to let you
yesterday.
remove.
As of
Was it
recording, on September 4th, it was literally yesterday. They made it so you could put people in a wardrobe.
Yeah, which honestly, best solution to that problem ever.
Oh yeah.
From a game dev perspective, I can 100% see the fact of we can't let you remove the people. It is not in our code to allow that. And that would crash so many things. So instead, we're going to let you just drag and drop them into a closet and pretend they don't exist.
Yeah, it's the closest thing to a quick play that they're ever going to have, I think.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised, just based on that, right? That they're able to maintain all of the things like the conversations and other things like that. Because you could straight up, even in multiplayer, do things like relationships. You could do things like romances and stuff. And you could have characters remember things that you told them. And they were able to keep that despite even having ways to shelve characters. I think that's fucking impressive.
My brother and I are literally having a typical high school drama competition to see who can woo Shadowheart first.
Nice.
And the fact that that's something you can do in a multiplayer game and have that back and forth is just phenomenal.
Oh, definitely. I think honestly that this is something that I've really enjoyed about the kind of stuff Larian's done, because they used to be able to have in Divinity 2, you could have conversations between players, origin characters and stuff. Yeah. You could even get into arguments. I had one where it was I feel like Ifon would say something else to the Red Prince, and maybe we don't agree with it. You could even choose to get to a point to where, especially because I don't want to do any spoilers for anybody who hasn't played Divinity Original Sin 2, but there's a point in the game where you could betray the party, and it's not exactly the evil solution. It's kind of like what you're expected to do in a way.
Right.
And and you could even do that to your player 2, player 3, or whatever, and turn on them to try to get to the thing you need to get to at this part of the game. And I thought that was really interesting. It's like that dialogue option is there to say, fuck you, I got mine,
Yep.
And then what ends up happening if you actually take that option for your player 2 and 3?
You turn on it, you're removed from each other's parties. It puts you in, and whoever ends up, the rest of your party who ends up siding with you, it puts you on their side instead, and you can kill your other player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And this is in Divinity, not Baldur's Gate, correct?
Yeah, this is in Divinity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can kill your other player
I mean, you
and
Yeah,
can
like
do
try to
that
get to
in
the end game by yourself.
you
I
can do
thought
that
that
in
was kind of
Baldur's
cool.
Gate as well, technically.
I was gonna
Uh,
say, I guess you could technically do that.
yeah. But yeah, no, I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate, and I love it. Luke, how much have you been playing?
So I haven't been playing as much as I want to. I keep redoing builds. I can't decide if I want to do like a barbarian paladin or like just a good old human fighter. I really am just I get out the tutorial and I've seen like all these speed runs too where people do it in like sub 2 minutes or something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've
That's
been
impressive.
yeah, a lot of it's like pretty exploitative obviously, like you
Yeah.
skip most of like the mind flayer fight.
Yeah, no, I first off, what remedied that for me and something that I absolutely love is the fact that you can respec with withers. So if you end up like
I love
halfway
that so
through a
much.
playthrough and you're like, I'm really not feeling my shadow monk right now, and I would love to just play a paladin, you can just go to withers and be like, yo, dude, here's 100 gold. Let me play that paladin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
the
far,
mistake. Oh god.
I was saying so far I only used Wither's respec to turn Lizelle into a monk because I was already a fighter. Because I played a human fighter actually. I went with my off-stream playthrough. I'm playing my character Maseo from Crispy Tavern's Shadow over Carconos game.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
just like playing him as I imagine how he would act in this kind of situation, and it's been a lot of fun. It's nice being able to play. It's the stereotype, right? The human fighter, but it's
Yeah.
like you're not basic though. I really like that. Did you see some of the class dialogue decisions?
For like as a one of my characters is a ranger. Actually, my brother and I,
Mm.
the game was just the two of us, were playing Robin Hood and Little John. So I am a elven ranger and he is a half orc barbarian. And the number, especially with the, obviously some slight spoilers, we'll try to keep it relatively spoiler free. But in the Emerald Grove with the druids, there's so many special choices you can make as a ranger in dialogue, and it's so cool.
Oh, definitely. They're not even always ideal, but sometimes
No.
they are, and it's interesting when it is. Like there was one I had where it was like one of the tieflings was like practicing and sparring or some shit, right? And it looked like there wasn't that lot like a lot of dialogue, but as a fighter, you're able to train him to actually get better. I thought that was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. And there's a couple of other choices like that where like a fighter would say things like you could tell they're like a combat veteran, like they're not just a guy with a sword and a shield.
Right. Yeah.
It's like this guy's like a soldier type. Like this guy's like, I've been through some shit, like that kind of character
Mhm.
instead. And it's lent to some dialogue decisions that I really like that fit with like the character fantasy I was going for. So I really appreciated seeing that.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those situations where you're going to be able to build like the same type of character with slight differences, and each playthrough you're really going to get a lot of different things out of it.
Oh,
I'm
100%.
Yeah, I'm still shocked the amount of like anything from ancestry to just class dialogue specific options I've run into. It is really cool.
I will say, on the note of the class dialogue and the fact that they're not always the right, like the good option.
True.
My brother playing a barbarian, most of the time the barbarian dialogue choices are not the okay guys, let's be rational about this. Like you'll have in a certain situation, let's say there's two people that are kind of arguing and you could tell it's about to escalate to a fight, and like as a cleric you can say something like, guys, come on, this is not the peaceful solution to this, let's be calm and rational. And as a ranger you can say something like, you guys need to calm down. Those goblins are the least of your worries. And then as a barbarian, you can say something along the lines of, I will beat the shit out of both of you if you do not shut up right now.
Yeah.
And I love it because there's such a contrast between the, like, I'm helpful because my class has like this degree of utility and such. And like, look, you chose barbarian because you want to hit shit. You're going to hit shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can play into your character fantasy and you won't always get what you personally would want out of the situation, but you'd get what your character would want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives you a bit of like freedom with being able to make that choice if it pops up?
Yeah. And I do really like it. I think moving into one of our points here about the like Baldur's Gate 3 versus D&D, like the adaptation and how accurate it is. I do like how they, with that stuff, make it still clearly a role-playing game. It's not just an MMORPG kind of thing. It's not just
Mm.
like click here, go here, fight this, and you're done. There is
Yeah,
a
it's not
large
Neverwinter.
degree. Yeah, there's a large
Yeah.
degree of role play into the game. And honestly, your decisions in dialogue with characters feels like it has almost more of an impact on the future of the game than how you handle combats and such.
Right, because a lot of the time combat, it really is just surviving, like in
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3. Because you're not really gonna know down the road what those dialogue options are gonna bring. I think that it really does help with the replayability, just as like kind of going back to what we said with classes as well. It doesn't really matter what your combat build is, and they made respecking so easily, which I think is a problem that a lot of games run into. Like even your popular MMOs and just other RPGs, a lot of times they put like this weird weight on making the ability to respect have a lot of weight to it, which is just more times than not annoying. It's not fun. Like there's no upside to it, but they always like say like, oh, it shouldn't be too easy. And then Baldur's Gate 3 is like, no, it should be easy.
Well, and
like there's no downside.
Yeah, and it brings the potential to the conversation of like, should you allow respecking in your normal D&D games? And I think that's, I've, as a DM, I try to let players do like play what they want to play. Obviously, if someone's getting tired of playing something, they're not having fun with it, then they are going to, for the most part, have a hard time enjoying every session after that. If it's like, I've been playing a monk, I really am not liking how the monk is turning out. And roleplay wise, saying that the monk is just suddenly a trained fighter with heavy armor and a pike, that doesn't make a ton of sense in most situations. But you don't want to just shut them down either. Now, some things like transitioning from any class to a warlock or any class to a cleric or sometimes even a paladin, those
That's
are
a bit
really
harder.
easy.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think those are easier. You're a fighter and you want to play a warlock. It's as simple as you made a pact with a eldritch entity and they removed everything about you and shoved power inside. And so that's something that makes a little more sense. But then going from warlock to fighter doesn't make much sense.
Or maybe going to sorcerer, it's like, I just remembered at the ripe age of 35 that my dad was a dragon, and then your ancestral bloodline activates.
I inherited my, great-great-grandfather's wealth of 950 spell points.
Yeah, and my body became frail now, and so the heavy armor I was wearing it just shakes off, revealing a robe that was hiding underneath the whole time.
Yeah, I think those are definitely possibilities, but it's the difference, because there are differences, and something we'll probably touch on it in a bit, but there is a difference substantially between playing a video game and playing a tabletop game. Playing a video game and being able to respec is a blessing, because again, how many hours can you sink into Baldur's Gate before you even leave Act 1? We haven't left Act 1 in the game I'm playing with my brother and my friend, and we're like 65 hours in. Just because
my God.
Now that's across, other games and such as well, to be fair. That specific game, we're not 65 hours in. But regardless, like just between a few games with different people, we're still, we're exploring every inch of the map. And so
there's a lot to explore.
Exactly.
There's a lot to explore. Like I got like 40 hours by the time I made it to Act 2.
Yeah.
So I think you get your money's worth by Act 2 already.
But yeah, that's something I saw people saying online, is that Act 1 itself is more of a campaign than we get from most AAA games nowadays. But
100%.
How far in, how much time you're going to put into the game when you then realize, I don't want to play this character anymore, but I don't want to start over. So respecking in a video game is like, it's such a gift. But then in a tabletop game, where do you draw the line? Where do you say, yes, I want you to have fun, but also we are running a story, and there's always the option of just retire one character and bring someone else in. That's the easy option, but
killed off screen or just retires off screen.
Or
what I was
just
going to say,
kills them mid-session, but
what I was going to say, that I've actually done this before, so I might be able to contribute a little bit to this, because my brother, he frequently makes a lot of characters whenever we used to play 5e together a lot. And what he would try to do whenever he had a character that he wanted to switch to being something different is he kind of had enough in his backstory to be able to have like, this could be this class, or this class. You know what I mean? Like
He
it
had
could fit a
options
couple of
built
different,
in.
yeah, like it could fit a couple of different slots that it's not necessarily married entirely to one. The only exception I would say are to his warlock characters. That was a bit harder. There was one time where he switched to like a homebrewed kind of witch that he saw from Middle Finger of Vecna. If you're familiar with their witch, it's really good.
Mhm.
However, what we ended up doing with that is we kept his patron, and we just kept that as like a character associated with him the whole time. Um, so
Okay.
that didn't change too much when it came to that, especially since he was at the point where his patron and him were not on good terms. So we
Okay.
felt that it was kind of still a useful thing. And he was able to find something that was a subclass in the witch that was still reminiscent of some of the powers that he had as that warlock subclass. So it wasn't too far of a deviation. I think the main thing, like you were saying, like that would be a bigger concern is, yeah, a fighter turning into a sort, and not like not multi-classing, but turning into a sorcerer, to where it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'm a combat veteran of so and so years. I guess the whole time my dad was a dragon. I just never told anyone.
Well,
You
and
know,
then how do
that's
you
yeah.
run the loss of experience as a fighter if you're completely respecking,
Oh yeah.
especially since like, the whole point of like the fighter class is you've trained to that point of being that good with
Oh
your
yeah.
weapons. So then
We're
you just become a
assuming you have that.
sorcerer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
where did that training
experience.
go?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's just how hard it is to switch between martial and caster a
Mhm.
lot of the time. Obviously, caster to caster, there's always like an easier way to like BS it just because of magic sources kind of having a
Yeah,
lot of
you can kind of
overlaps.
you can kind
Honestly,
of flip it, like
yeah,
especially if you have enough like if you have a good enough understanding of like when it comes to your magic lore and stuff like that, like you could always find another way to kind of reinterpret how that could manifest. So yeah, between caster to caster or even caster to half caster, that's not so bad. But the full transition from martial to caster, I think you're right in that like that is much harder. That's a taller order.
Mhm. Or from caster to marshal.
Oh yeah.
Now that one I'll actually say I think that one might be a little easier because to say through some fluke you lost your magic, the weave is no
Mm.
longer within you kind of thing.
You had to
And
like
so
relearn.
you had to pick up a blade. That, you have some weirdness of explaining how you suddenly got your 9 levels of wizard transferred into 9 levels of experience as a fighter, sure, because that's a lot of training.
Mm.
But you could say that, well, I've been in combat enough with our other fighter. I know a lot about how it goes. So it was just learning the weapons. You take a
Mm.
month off in game to train up. It's kind of fudging it a bit, but it's doable. So caster to martial might even be easier than martial to caster.
yeah. No,
Mm,
I
could
definitely
be.
agree with that.
Yeah, like I think something else you could also do too is like to make the transition a bit easier on either of these in the spectrum, right? Um, is by picking something like a subclass, right? That has a
Mhm.
little bit of connection to what you were previously. Um, I know that that can probably make it a little bit more limiting when it comes to what if I just wanted to play a full-on fighter, but it's like it would be easier to say I want to be a fighter after being a wizard for this long, and then I go maybe an Eldritch Knight. You know
Eldritch
what I mean?
Knight, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like if
Right.
you're a sorcerer and you want to go full rogue instead, you
Mm.
go arcane trickster.
Yeah, exactly. So that way it's like, okay, that's a lot easier to explain, when it comes to like the lore of what you did as a spellcaster, and you don't have to change as much. But either
Mhm.
way, you are going to have to make some sacrifices, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to making that kind of transition in the story.
Yeah, and if the player's constantly kind of a grass is always greener person and they're switching because they want that feature for every class, I mean, then it might be an issue of like maybe respecting's too easy. But if it's one or two transitions like that, I think it's always like it's always a good faith thing to like let the players
Mm.
switch and not hold them to like that previous class.
Yeah.
So I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to do it.
I think the best cases, like where I would be the most accepting to it, or like in the case, like I said, with my brother, to where it's like, I know you're getting bored. It's been a while playing this class, and there are things you want to try out. And it's like, yeah, then I'm totally cool with respeccing without any cost or anything like that. Um, and then like maybe if I gave you some class specific magic items, maybe I switch a couple of them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Unless it's like really important shit, like you found some legendary fucking sword or whatever, and it's like I can't justify changing it. You know. Um, I think that's when it gets harder, especially is like when you start getting later in the game and you start finding things that are like plot important items and stuff like that, or like
Or not
important to
just that,
the world building.
when the character becomes important to the plot, and
Yeah.
it's like you are the most powerful wizard we've ever come across aside from the lich that we're hunting down, and then the wizard wants to become a fighter. You know,
I think
that changes it up a little bit too.
that's at that point, right? When we reach that level, I want to say like the third or fourth tier of play. That's when it's like, okay, I'm going to want to have a conversation with my player, and maybe we can find a compromise in, say, an additional character. Maybe we stable him
Right.
for a bit, things
Mhm.
like that. You know what I mean? I think that's when it's like this is when having a secondary character is going to be the better option, I think.
Yeah,
Because
no, I would agree with
otherwise,
that.
yeah, it could cause some effects that may even dampen their enjoyment of the story as opposed to the gameplay, you know?
Well, and that would affect everyone at the table instead of just
Yeah,
them. Not that you want to favor
exactly.
someone over another, but favor the greater over this individual kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like,
Right.
and that's the end of the day, that's what all this is, right? It's like a conversation. And so, finding out what could we do so that you're not bored of fighting, so that you don't have to spam Eldritch Blast every fucking turn because I know you're
Yep.
sick of it. It's like how do we find that in between? Do we do multi-classing? Do we give you another character so you can try out a completely different thing?
Or
It's
then you
like,
can look at homebrewing the thing too. My
yeah,
brother,
that's also an option.
his Way of the Four Elements monk, Way of the Four Elements is pretty known as a not that great put together subclass.
It's got some issues.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we are using a completely different version of it that has, of course, the same ties, the same core, but it's just a homebrewed version. And so when he was like, this Way of the Four Elements thing isn't working for me, but I really want to play this character, instead of making him a new character, instead of tabling or stabling or whatever, we just looked at it and we're like, okay, well, let's revamp this subclass and make it fun to play.
And I know fucking so many people who I played with who did this to Rangers as well.
Oh yeah.
Because like,
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many
yeah.
variants of Rangers and reworks
yeah.
that I've looked over.
Like
I'm
an
gonna
Unearthed
say
Arcana,
it.
right?
I'm gonna say it. Rangers fine. Leave it the hell alone.
Ranger's
Okay.
fine, Ranger's boring. That's my take.
Ranger,
Yeah.
look, people's complaints with Ranger most of the time is of how limiting they feel it is because you
Because it sucks.
build an entire character for a specific theme, and if the campaign ever stretches outside of the theme, your character feels useless. I completely
Yeah, it's a
understand
perfect
that.
role player in that
Yeah.
way.
Exactly. Ranger is 100% a role play class. That's what it's built to be. It's built to be role play, but I'm okay in combat. That's
It's
my
one of those
take on
things,
Ranger.
too. Yeah, it's one of those things too that like if there's ever a time to introduce maybe a DMPC like or mentor character, like it almost is the Ranger because it's like
absolutely.
okay, we know we're going to be in this terrain fighting these things, and we need an expert that can make like perception checks. It's like, oh look, that's literally all the Ranger core features, and then they get to play pet collector on the side, I guess, depending on the variant you're playing.
Yeah.
I will say this when it comes to Ranger, because I've had a lot of opinions about the Ranger, especially because I played so many of them and then my brothers played so many of them. I always thought this. Whenever someone said Rangers suck, they were never talking about damage per round. They were never talking about all that shit. However, I feel like that conversation's been hijacked by people who do talk about the min-max shit. And then they all say, oh, Ranger's good. Look how much damage it does. I don't give a fuck about the damage. I never did. I don't care.
Right.
It always did all right. That was never the issue. The issue is that it plays like how the Warlock plays, which I also have a problem with. You hex something. I mean, you Hunter's Mark something, and then you Eldritch Blast. I mean, you attack it with your longbow. Oh wait, oh fuck, they do the exact same thing. Yeah, exactly. And you know what it does? It gives you a fucking MMO rotation, and that's kind of boring.
Well, and that's why, like Warlock and Ranger, honestly, I think Ranger would be a good one too. But they're prime multi-class candidates. You typically, if you're building a full Warlock, you're going to run into that. I do the same thing over and over. But let's say you're a fighter or even a wizard or something, and you do like a 2 to 3 level dip into Warlock and get some of the Warlock abilities and like the invocations and such. Then you're still playing your main class, which has the versatility and such, and you also have some of the Warlock benefits, and you're not stuck in that loop. Same thing if you go into Ranger.
They both also have pretty good spell lists. My only issue Because I mean, aside from that, with the whole fucking rotation kind of feeling, and yeah, like they'll have things like the summoning of animals and all stuff like that. I think all that's perfectly fine when it comes to like combat. My issue is how that ends up feeling when it comes to the actual exploration pillar itself. I think my issue with Rangers has always been because D&D doesn't really have much of an exploration pillar, that it makes it so
Mhm.
they don't really get any particular moments to shine other than ignoring what bare rules already exist. And I frequent a lot of OSR blogs. I frequent a lot of things done by like Bastion Land and stuff like that. And these guys are like masters when it comes to how to do exploration. And it sucks to see that whatever bare stuff that we do have in 5e ends up, here's the guy who does it. By the way, all he does is have a bunch of rules that say he doesn't, you know? He doesn't
Yeah.
get lost, he doesn't get this, he doesn't get, and it's like you can't,
Right.
you can't, you can't, you can't, instead of telling you things that you can do. And I think that that's just kind of bad design, honestly.
They're
It's
very
yeah.
campaign specific in that sense. If your campaign
Yeah,
has that in it, if you are playing a survival woodland wandering campaign,
but not even that,
then
right? Like
well,
you
they
should
shine a
have
bit more
exploration.
there, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you should have exploration in your D&D games, no?
yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you
You
always
should
should.
have things for them to shine. You should have moments to where it's like it's cool that the ranger was able to do things like that. And yeah, you got things like Goodberry, but then all Goodberry ends up doing is just removing the need to be able to
It removes
have to
survival.
find, yeah, remove survival. Yeah. It removes survival from the game. It's a spell, it's an example of a spell that's too good actually. That's my main, I think that's the crux of the issue with Ranger, is that it makes all of the things that you could do to potentially make exploration interesting redundant. Therefore, WotC feels like they can't really add anything else to it unless they just add completely different exploration mechanics that they usually design within those individual adventure modules, right? And those are
Yeah.
only the ones that end up giving a fuck about exploration,
No,
because
that's a good
most of the time what
point.
they do is just like what they did for like Descent into Avernus, which is just like, oh, they explore, but like they don't really have to.
Right.
You can just kind of take them to the place. It's like they do a lot of that, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's fine.
That's a really good point. It's like Rangers basically handholding you through all the stuff that would be interesting checks for any other
Yeah,
class. It's kind of like how, like, I mean, rogues disarm traps and like it's good, you want that, but then usually the DM has like multiple types of traps. There's only so many, survival checks you can do, and Ranger just breeze
yeah,
through all of them.
Yeah.
yeah. It's the thing, right? Is like if I make an interesting enough trap for a rogue, I'm not gonna say you just make a check and you fix it. I'm gonna say you, because you're the rogue, you're the guy who can figure this out. You know, I'll make you make checks maybe to give you hints, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you a puzzle
One of
because
the
rogues are
wires is
Right.
smart.
red.
Yeah, exactly. One of the wires is red, one of the wires is yellow. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for a Ranger, there's no puzzle that is this
No,
meat rotten.
no.
Mm, yeah,
There's no
exactly.
puzzle you can't just solve with that with a survival check. Oh, 15. Okay.
This large cat footprint will belong to one of three creatures: a large cat, a bird, or a dog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, what am I supposed to do with it? There's nothing to solve. So then it's like, I a lot of DMs will just feel compelled to just give you the answer
I
on a
still
Yeah.
skill check.
think that Ranger is a good class. Like I still think that it,
It's
it
not their fault,
it's yeah,
not
Yeah.
entirely.
and it's one of those things where, again, I talked about changing up the way the four elements monk in one of my games for my brother's character. Like there's things that you can do to make it more worthwhile. And honestly, I think one of the steps, I mean, people always say, oh, Ranger, first thing that comes to mind is Aragorn, because he was a good Ranger. And
Yeah, he's badass.
so just make Ranger more like Aragorn. Well, how do you do that? Well, he has the tracking, he has the survival stuff. But if you notice with the movies, especially, but even in the books a little bit, because the books go more into detail, but the Lord of the Rings, whole thing in general shows Aragorn like he stops, he picks something up, a leaf, he smells it or whatever, and he's like, we're going this way. And it doesn't tell you why. And I think that's
Right.
actually the thing that Ranger it has that is kind of like you said, there isn't a puzzle to it. You just know, and so you do. So that should be more of a minor part of the class than it is, because I think it does feel like it's half the class is just roll a survival check and you're good, you're done. So
Mm.
make that just like a passive thing almost, and then give it more badass feeling things.
I
What's
think
kind of funny
perhaps for
too.
oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was saying what's kind of funny too is a lot of the reworks I noticed they'll like take away features, if anything. There'll be like spellless ranger or there'll be like companionless ranger. And I think it's really funny that everyone's in sync with the rangers to make it more simple when it's already kind of straightforward.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if you noticed that.
There's some of the spellless ones that I find kind of interesting though. There
and
are some that I've seen like on Unearthed Arcana that can make some pretty interesting kinds of like ways of how do you supplement it without like this spell or that spell. Um, I think when you said earlier, when it comes to like yeah, there's straightforward, yeah, maybe like there's things that you probably know like intuitively because that's what wisdom is, right? It's kind of like intuition.
It's yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I
We've always
think
said
yeah.
intelligence is book smarts, wisdom is street smarts. That's the way
Yeah.
we've always explained it to
Or I
people
guess
in my games.
forest smarts, right?
Well, yeah, but it's
True.
the difference
Jungle
between what you've
smarts.
learned
Yeah,
from
urban
Jungle
ranger
smarts.
variant.
yeah, it's the difference between what you learn in a book and through
Mm.
study and what you learn through experience. That's the difference between intelligence and wisdom.
I think to take that to be able to make it into a puzzle is where I would go back into like what some people do in like the old school kind of role playing scene of like player made bestiaries of giving you symbols and things, not necessarily telling you what they are, and allowing you to be able to piece them together yourself.
Yeah, it'd be really cool if like a ranger character, the DM would have to go all out for it. But imagine someone
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
there playing a ranger and the DM was like, okay. And then at session 1, they slam down this book in front of the ranger and it's like this bestiary with like the footprints of different D&D creatures. And then as they're going through the game, the DM's like, okay, you find a footprint that looks like this, and they slide them a printout of it. And then the ranger flips through their book and they're trying to find which one matches. That's a good way to make the ranger feel more immersive. Now it's also less of the like dice rolling if you just have your book, but that's kind of like the compendium of knowledge of the ranger. And I think it at least makes it a little more interactive than just it's a big cat footprint.
Right.
Have you seen there was an adventure I was looking through. It's like a what's it called? It can be used for 5e, but it can be used for a bunch of different other systems. It's called Hot Springs Island. And something the way that a lot of monsters are presented is like when you find their signs, it will tell you like what are the signs of that creature, what are things that it would do. And so then you as the player might make your own little bestiary. Like instead of like the idea you had there of like giving you the big book of monsters, like how about you make it, you know? And we start from the beginning.
You take your
Yeah.
notes. Well, and I've run a character before, a necromancer, who had a grimoire, and the grimoire was also my notebook. And so it kind of became that, you know, as we're going, it's like the DM describes that we come into a cave that smells of rot and decay, and we hear the shuffling of feet. You know, those are anyone who's played zombie games knows that it's a fucking zombie. But
yeah.
it goes in the notebook, and then it's like, okay, now my character and I have learned these are the signs of zombie presence, and my character would know that.
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So then, yeah, you now have a thing. See, that's the thing is like, I want that to be a base part of the game, and then Rangers are just like the guy for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they're the guy when it comes to like figuring it out, but everybody can kind of do a little bit of it. You know, everybody's good at social. The bard is the guy when it comes to social. You know, it doesn't mean he's always, yeah, he could be the face, but he doesn't always have to be. You know, everyone can still kind of do it. Maybe even the rogue can kind of do it in some ways if they want to give it expertise on their charisma or persuasion, shit like that, or persuasion or intimidation or deception and all that. But yeah, like I like that idea of like, here's the base system, and then the Rangers layered on top of it instead of it feeling more like he just kind of removes it.
What if on that note, like perception and survival checks to like try to figure out what you're tracking or something? You got a certain number of like clues or signs based on your roll. So like a 10 would give you one, you know, solid clue. Like you find the footprint, or you find a tuft of fur or something. 15 would give you 2, 20 plus would give you 3, and the ranger always gets an extra clue.
Yeah, I like
Right.
that.
That
And
makes
then the
sense.
ranger, well, now that you have those clues, right? Maybe there's like even a mechanic of the game where it's like, yeah, those clues can be directly converted into finding things out about the monster's actual stat block. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you basically have to guess what an ability would do. So then, straight up, I could tell you how much HP it has. I
Or
could tell you how, yeah.
you find red scales, you
Yeah.
find burnt ground, and
Yeah.
you find
You find its features and like
yeah,
its
and so
abilities
okay,
and
it's
things
got
it could
fire
do.
resistance,
Yeah. Or it's weak to this. Or it has a, we won't say recharge 5/6, but we'll tell the player recharge 5/6 fire breath
Yeah.
Right.
ability. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, it can do that now. And it's like, okay, cool. And I have the specifics of that. So I could kind of learn what I'm gonna run into before we even fight it. So I know how to beat it before I even get there, you know? And
Yeah,
that
and
feels like the
then
thing the ranger would know, right? Like they're the guy who would piece this together, and then when he's there, he knows what to do.
yeah, and then obviously I feel like that would then bring like they need to be able to like adaptively learn how to counter new types of foes, and I think like building that bestiary and then having the recall knowledge
hmm
and then gaining that bonus might be the way to do it on the fly. And I've seen
Well,
some classes like have you be able to change your favorite enemy, but if you do it through a system like this, it feels more natural and fairer to give them multiple, foes, so to speak.
yeah, change it from
Mm.
favored enemy to studied enemies, and once you log a certain number of aspects about a creature, you learn the things about it, then you get a certain bonus to dealing with it. And even it can be different by the different types of creature. Undead creatures is now a studied enemy, and you know how to exploit their undead fortitude or
And
something like that.
you can almost lean into like kind of a headhunter style, because
Yeah,
like
yeah.
headhunters are rangers usually. Like
Oh yeah.
I would guess like the predator is definitely a ranger, like
Mhm.
I would
different
say, yeah.
classes. But like that aspect's never really fleshed out because they are one note because of just how the game's designed.
Yeah, for sure. So not to kill a good conversation, we've drifted a little bit from Baldur's Gate 3.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. There is compromise. There is a ranger in Baldur's Gate 3, and do you guys know who
True.
he's played by?
Who?
Matthew Mercer.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
I've heard of that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
I've
know who
heard of
that guy
that guy.
is?
Yeah.
He's this really small indie tabletop RPG creator guy. He has like he has this really like budding podcast show kind of thing, like an actual play he's been working on for years. Poor guy's struggling. So we really want to shout out Matthew Mercer in this
If you
small
guys
show
don't,
called Critical Role.
if you're not already, go follow Matthew Mercer on like Twitter and all of his social media. Bump those numbers up. We could probably get him to like 20 followers. I'm sure he'd appreciate it.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
got like this indie RPG coming out recently. Like I think it's called
Oh,
like
yeah.
Daggerfall, maybe.
Daggerheart, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Daggerheart.
Small indie
Fucking
thing. Small
Daggerfall.
indie thing. Daggerfall. But yes, no, I did not know that Matthew Mercer voiced someone in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm surprised I didn't know
Yeah.
that. But yeah, to connect the things here, Baldur's Gate 3 is a really good adaptation, I think, of 5th edition. There are things that are different and things that I wish maybe were a little closer to 5e, but those are more just my familiarity with 5th edition as opposed to a gripe against Baldur's Gate. And
Yeah, learning the bonus actions is definitely like a little weird, but to be fair, some of them I had to check if they were bonus actions in 5e too. Like a lot of them just don't get used. I feel like Baldur's Gate
Jumping,
actually gives
right?
me
yeah,
Jumping,
is a big
that's the
one.
jumping
main
is
thing.
so heavily used in Baldur's Gate. Well, and the offhand
Shove.
attack.
Shoving. Yeah.
Shove,
shoving.
yeah, if I have a free bonus action, I shove most of the time. But
Bro,
no,
I shove all the time in that fucking game.
the offhand attack as a bonus action, I honestly might incorporate that into my game because normally it's with two-weapon fighting. You make an attack with your main hand, and then you can use your bonus action to attack with your offhand. But in Baldur's Gate 3, if you're dual wielding, you can always use your bonus action to attack, regardless of what you use for your main action. So
yeah, and that seems fair.
And I like it because you're still limited. It's not like you're going to be using your bonus action to swing with a great axe. It's going to be a dagger, short sword, something like that. So it's limited, but it allows you to go and cast your fairy fire and then get your advantage instead of having to wait an entire round to take advantage of it. Which does potentially lead into some issues with power and the power creep, which is why, I've seen some people talk about how I love that I can cast 2-leveled spells in a turn with my action and my bonus action if it's a bonus action spell. And I think that should probably stay the way it is in 5th edition for the most part, because you don't want to allow that many leveled spells to eke out, particularly in higher level gameplay. In early levels, it doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
And in higher levels, the combinations you can get from bonus action and main action, especially if you are a sorcerer with Quicken Spell, that just gets immediately busted. I mean, you'd at that point be able to cast 2 fireballs in a turn, for example, at 3rd level spells.
I do think the balance, though, just stems from the fact that they know the game caps out at a certain level. So, like, they don't have to deal with, 6+ level spells.
You're not going to be having people slinging 2 power word kills in a turn because it doesn't exist.
I think it's also to kind of make, like, sorcerers feel like a little bit extra, like, give them a little bit of extra oomph. Because I know, like, people will always say things like, I'm pretty sure sorcerers are kind of lower on the tier list when it comes to, like power budget. And being able to do things like Quicken Spell to do 2 fireballs, like people always wanted to do, like being able to do that feels cool, feels badass. I also really like the thing too of like, and I didn't know this was a thing, and it confused me at first, that anybody can use any spell scroll. I don't know why that's not a thing in 5e. In fact, it's funny because I kept handing my wizard spell scrolls because I thought my fighter couldn't cast them, and then one time I noticed on my hotbar that like Fly was down there, and I was like, oh, wait, I can use it?
I've always
been
run
handing
it
him
that
over.
way, though.
Yeah, I've been handing him over because,
You thought he couldn't do it, yeah. No, I've always been running that in my games of if it's on a scroll, you can cast it. Because to me, the thing of the scroll, the scrolls aren't printed in a fucking scroll mill. They're not mass produced and, there's someone standing outside a Walmart handing them out with the flyers. So it's not like it's that crazy of a power thing. When the scroll is made, it's because someone's putting the magic into it, and that magic is sealed behind the words on the scroll. So I've always viewed it that way.
It, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've always viewed it that way, as the scroll is kind of like making it's like potions. Can anybody use a potion? Absolutely. So anybody can use a scroll.
No, I think that's a fair way of doing it.
I also really liked, and this is a rule I'm keeping. I always did bonus action potions for yourself, and then like an action to administer to somebody else. I think that's perfectly fine. What I thought was really funny too, though, is throwing a potion. Have you guys been doing that lately?
Always funny.
I love it so much. The only problem is you can accidentally kill someone with it.
Yeah, you can miss
if you hit them. If you hit the person with the potion. So like if they're just, if they're at 5 hit points and you're throwing a potion at them, great. They might take a couple points of damage from the throw, but then they're healed up. That's technically negating a couple points, but you'd be better to throw it at their feet, but whatever. Sometimes you need to hit them. But if you have someone who's at like 2 failed death saves and you're like, I'm going to get you up by throwing a potion at you, you've just killed your friend, dude. Like, that's a big old rip. But I do like
it's kind of funny though.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. On the note of throwing, I found out you can deal an insane amount of damage in Baldur's Gate 3 by throwing a rat. I did not
really
know
you
this
can pick rats up.
So if you can just smaller creatures you can throw. I think they might have to be knocked out or something. I don't know. But so we and I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but my buddy and I, we were in that game, and my buddy comes over, and he's no spoilers, but basically there's this person in a cage, which happens often enough that that's not a spoiler. And he shoots the cage to release the person, and something happened. I don't know if he used a fire arrow on accident or if it was trapped, but it exploded, and I went down to like 2 hit points because I was standing right there. And I was like, you bastard, get back here. And I was chasing him down, and he was running away. So there was a rat on the path between me and him. And so I'm just like, fuck it, kill the rat, pick it up, and chuck it at him just for fun. And I dealt 14 damage by throwing a rat at him.
That is funny as shit.
I have no idea why. I almost killed him. And what made it even better was the fact that he's like, what was that? What did you throw? And then he looks at the ground. He goes, a rat? You hit me with a rat for 14 damage? And my brother goes, wait, where did you get the rat? And I was like, oh, it was in the room that we were just in between me and him. He goes, was there multiple rats or was there just the one? And I'm like, just the one that I saw. And he starts frantically looking around the room, and he goes, no, No, I'm like, what's going on? He goes, I had just cast Speak with the Animals and I talked to the rat and he said that he was just scared and wanted to go home.
Aww.
and then I murdered him and threw him at the paladin. So that was unfortunate.
He's home now.
He's home now.
He's home.
That poor boy.
But yeah,
Rip.
I probably, there's definitely some things like throwing potions. I mean, it's weird. It doesn't really make sense to work in 5e.
I don't know. I'm okay with it. Like, it's like, okay, here's how I would say it. If someone wanted to throw a potion of healing, yeah, it cracks open, and then your passed out ass just like laps it up or something real quick, and it just gives you just enough to get you back. I'm okay with that.
Would I be more likely to do, because I like the mechanic, but I don't want it to apply to every potion, is to just say that there's a new type of potion, and it's like
you could do like flasks versus elixirs versus you could like come
Well,
up with like the
just
type of
even
bottle maybe.
yeah, pressurized potion. Like the potion's been
Right.
converted into like this gas in this bottle. It's completely sealed, and so you throw it at the ground or at a person. It breaks and releases, and then that gives them the effect. I'd be okay with implementing something like that to make that a function of the game, but to just say it works for every potion, I don't know, because I don't know if you guys know this. Yeah, you can throw healing potions at people, but the splash radius of potions affects multiple people with the same power level. So if you put a potion of speed in between on the ground and get 3 people gathered around it within the splash radius, and you just punch the potion of speed, you all get the potion of speed effects.
That is kind of funny.
So,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
where
great in a video game, but
Oh yeah.
at the tabletop, it's I like the things that keep it a tabletop role-playing game versus a
Right.
video game.
And that's the question of like, do you change the duration, the potency? Do you have like different variants of like ingested versus applied?
Well, and
You
if
know,
it was
stuff
a
like that.
gas potion, a pressurized potion that had the splash effect, then I'd say, that's kind of, those potions might be weaker to begin
Right.
with, but they have the area of effect. So that's where you would balance it out. A potion of speed, instead of giving everyone the haste spell for the full duration, you get haste for a turn or two, but instead of being lethargic afterwards and not being able to do anything, you just can't take a main action, where it's a dumbed down version.
I think something you can do to make it so it's more like how you do it in the tabletop, right? I think something you could do is also being able to allow someone to take a potion of healing, maybe be able to craft it into something like that to turn it into like healing bomb, but with
Yeah.
like a lessened effect, and then just like have that as a thing, right? Like that is a kind of item.
Just a fucking potion of healing water balloon. You've got the
Yeah.
gnome artificer over there with like rubber balloons, a potion of healing in there, and then he's like pumping it up with a bicycle pump to get the pressure right.
And that's a kind of cool thing, because then it's like, okay, now you have like an idea for any budding artificers who are watching this, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
like, here's the thing you could suggest to your DM, like, here's half limit on half duration on a potion of speed, but your artificer just created a potion of speed bomb, And it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, now that it has an explosion, maybe you make it a little big, like, be careful where you throw it, kind of big.
You would get
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
enemies.
Yeah, you might speed up the nearby goblin who's shanking your buddy, and now he turns into the
Mhm.
Flash, And
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
want that.
yeah,
Imagine the dual wielding like Gloomstalker goblin on a speed potion. Like
yeah,
you
he's
don't,
like,
you don't
"Nothing
want
personal,
that.
kid." He
Exactly.
teleports behind your warlock. Yeah,
Nothing personnel.
Yeah, it just stabs you 8 times. Yeah.
that's funny as shit. But yeah, like, yeah, those are pretty cool ideas. I think of being able to find a compromise between the tabletop game, between the video game. I think that is something you're right about, though. As much as I like the game and as much as I like what people are doing in it, there are things I don't want to keep because of that, right? Like, there are things that make it too gamey, and I don't want it to be gamed. I want people to like, I want you to game what rulings we come through. Like,
Yeah.
what stuff we figure out. I want you to game the monsters. I want you to figure out how they work. I want you to game the characters. I want you to know how they respond to things and what they consider to be good and bad. I want you to game those things. Because once
Yeah,
you start
not
gaming, like the core combat systems and stuff, you just end up with a bunch of stuff that like I can't see in my head because it's just ridiculous. It's just
Right.
too ridiculous. It's like so ridiculous that it feels like you're no clipping in Skyrim. And at that
Right.
point, it's like that's not how I have fun personally.
You're
To
not
me,
playing the
that
game
yeah,
anymore.
to me that doesn't look like a TTRPG anymore
Yeah.
because no one would allow that in a TTRPG. And the kinds
Now,
Yeah.
of players that would seem to be coming from video games, and that's
mhm.
their tea. I'm not gonna piss in their cup, but I am gonna say that's not mine, and I
Yeah.
don't like it personally.
I do think that the shoving as a bonus action, obviously, shove is meant to replace an attack. I'm not going to say shoving as a bonus action in my games because I mean, I don't think it's going to do that much. But then at that point, everyone's turn when they have an open bonus action is going to be trying to shove someone, like it is in Baldur's Gate. It's fun in the video game, but I feel like unnecessary at the tabletop. But it has like something that I never, my years of playing D&D, and I never considered this when looking at the battle mat and such. But I do this all the time in Baldur's Gate because I figured it out with being able to shove so much. Is that if you need to run away and do something else, but
Shove
you
'em.
don't want to take an attack of opportunity, shove them. And if you're successful, you
Oh,
knock
yeah.
them even just 5 feet backwards. They don't get an attack of opportunity against you anymore because you're not adjacent. And
Right.
that has been a lifesaver in Baldur's Gate 3. And now after doing that, I'm like, you could totally do that in D&D. If you're looking at the battle mat and it's like, man, I'm going to get an attack of opportunity if I do this. But if I don't get to our downed ally this turn, they're dead. Then use your, at that point, it maybe say if it's the only combat action you take, it's a bonus action or however you want to do it. I don't know, but just you shove them away and you run. And it works really well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that ends up making it so that's an option that people who normally wouldn't do it, and now it becomes like part of their like it's something to consider, right? Because yeah, your wizard isn't gonna make all his shoves, right?
He's
With
not
his
going to make
minus
many
one
of
fucking
his
strength
shoves.
bonus.
Yeah.
He's against any like fighter type, he's not gonna make them. But he might get one off on your rogue type enemy, your like
Yeah.
striker kind of enemy that's going to be like plinking away at him, right?
There's-
Who's stuck
and
behind
that
your
kind
back
of-
lines.
and
And that
that
makes
enemy
sense if he's
who-
able to shove them away.
And he might have poisons and such that you don't
Yeah.
want to get that attack of opportunity on. Or again, the fact that sneak attack applies to your attack of opportunity, even if you already use it on your main turn. So if that rogue is going to get sneak attack on you again, and you're like, I don't want to deal with another 3d6 damage on top of whatever the hell his normal weapon does, shove him away and run.
I think it's perfectly fine. I guess maybe I would keep then shove as a bonus in some circumstances. I'd have to think about that. That's something to where
Yeah,
if
it's-
someone brought it up on the table, I might have a different answer depending on the time of day. You know, I'd have to think about that one.
It's almost like a disengage the way you're treating it.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
that's why-
true though. But it's
Go
a
ahead.
risky disengage. It doesn't work
True.
on
Yeah.
every enemy, and you have to roll to make it work. So it's not.
Yeah, it's like I would be okay with it because in the shove situation, because the bonus action, because it requires a check, I'm okay with them doing that because disengage as an action is like I'm forfeiting it to be able to run away.
Yeah.
Right.
The nice thing about doing that
This
too,
has a chance of failure.
yeah. The nice thing about doing it too is like by having that, it's like who's gonna end up using disengage as an action most of the time? Not a marshal. It's gonna be the
Yeah.
caster. So they don't
Mhm.
have another option after they do this. That's their turn. They get to get away, fight another day, not get their fucking ass cleaved by whoever was chasing them, right?
But with
it's
this,
like-
they could shove, run away, and then cast
Yeah.
a spell.
Exactly. And I'm okay with that. Because then I'm even
Yeah.
thinking about like, well, what are some cool like movement displacement things you could do as spells now? Like Thunderwave and things like that. Like maybe this could even lend to people using that kind of stuff more often if you try to do more situations as DM to put your casters in that position with good terrain choices and with things like that, right? Because
Mhm.
that's another thing, right? Is the shove is also fun because the terrain is really varied in this
Yep.
game, and
Making
I love
use
it.
of
Yeah.
your environment. Absolutely.
More D&D games need to do this. I have already been experimenting with a lot of that kind of stuff for the longest time, and you know it's fun coming up with different ways to be able to come up with elevation stuff. But something I always fucking hate whenever I play with anybody else, I feel like me and like my brother and a couple other people do it, and there's so many other DMs I play with who don't do these things, and it's kind of frustrating. It's
Mhm.
like I don't want to shove. I'm basically just going to be standing still for most fights, and that's how you make your fights really static, and why people don't use those actions, right? Like jumping or
Yeah,
shoving and shit like that.
you have to make the terrain of the fight unique enough. And I used
Yeah.
to be against battle mats because, I started in older editions. It was all theater of the mind kind of thing. Battle mats weren't as prevalent, but now I like them. I still don't use them for everything. But,
Hmm.
when you have the right group, theater of the mind can be great for explaining the terrain and such, but it's still so hard to paint the exact spatial situation of
Hmm.
so that everyone knows I'm 5 feet away from the ledge that's going to drop 30 feet down, then they move around and they attack someone. Are they still near the ledge? Are they not? Whereas with the battle mat, you have that spaced out.
Yeah, definitely. So when it
Yeah.
comes to Baldur's Gate, though,
Yeah.
something you wanted to ask was other studios using the D&D license. How do you guys feel about that? Or do we just hand everything to Larry?
Honestly, I'm all
They
for
definitely get
studios
first
doing their
pick. Yeah.
stuff, but Larry and Scott, yeah, they're always first to pick in the draft.
What then would you guys like to see? Because I have some things I would like to see, but I guess I'd go with loot first. What is a D&D like? Whether it's a video game or a setting, what would you like to see pop up in like the next Larian Studios D&D video game, or whoever ends up making it?
That's a hard one. I think I mean stuff like Planescape has always been like a really cool setting, at least in
Mhm.
my opinion. So like being able to like jump between like different worlds like that. And just with the medium it being a video game, there's a lot of like visual stuff you can show off too with it. So I think that'd be like a cool aspect. But it really is hard to like once you get into that higher level like campaigns, I have no idea how like a studio like Larian can like make wish, in a
Mhm.
game or like these other ninth level spells. So like once you start getting to higher like campaign settings, you I think one of the benefits of Baldur's Gate 3 is just the fact that it does cap out at 12th level. So
Mhm.
like I'm
Do you
really
feel like
curious.
do you feel like the setting would be difficult to do?
I think due to the nature of the setting, it's just higher level in general. Like
Mhm.
once you start getting to like the planar worlds,
Well, how do you
jumping
feel then
between them.
about Planescape Torment? Because that game came out like a couple years back. Well, not a couple years back. It's been a long fucking time, actually. It's been like,
Yeah,
what is it,
it's
like
it
the 90s?
yeah. Good, yeah,
Just
it's
a
a
couple
good old
years,
20
just
years.
There's a
yeah.
Yeah.
couple, yeah, in
It
vampire
was the
time. I'm
90s,
sorry,
yeah.
I talked to a lot of I had a lot of conversations with the Starians, so it's like time
Yeah,
starts to
yeah.
feel relative after a
Absolutely,
while,
yeah.
you know?
Not only is he a vampire, he's also an elf. Their perception of time's all wonky.
No, yeah.
True. So I actually that's before when I was playing a lot of like computer games myself. So have you played it a lot?
I didn't play Planescape personally. I had a lot of friends that did play it, and my brother also was a really big fan of it. I did get to play there was another game inspired by it. It was Torment Tides of Numenera. They just love Torment, these guys, they just
Big
love them
Torment
some
guys.
Torment. Yeah, big Torment guys. A real Torment style game. But yeah, like Torment Tides of Numenera, which I'm pretty sure was made by the same developers. I'm trying to remember if they were inspired by their work. But yeah, that was also a really good game, super high power level, because you were literally like an outcast shell of like a god that had invaded your body. And
Right.
yeah, it's very much a wild ass story. And Numenera is a wild ass setting. Um, and yeah, Planescape Torment though was also a really good game from what I had heard. And I would like to see like a Planescape 2 by Larian. But
It could be cool.
yeah, but to Zill, what would you like to see aside from a Planescape Torment 2 by Larian Studios? What would you like to see as a D&D game that would
Look,
pop up?
this is gonna be the most like basic bitch pumpkin spice latte answer, but man, would I love to see a like really well implemented Curse of Strahd Barovia game.
I completely agree.
Like
That's
I
fair.
know it's like it's the meme, everyone's favorite is Curse of Strahd, but look,
Yeah.
it's great for a reason. And to be able to have that, gothic horror game, like the
Mm.
way Larian's done it, where you go through and everything, you're trying to restore hope to these small villages, and there's some really eerie encounters and the kind of monsters that you don't see in most games because it's
Oh
this
yeah.
undead land, right? And then the looming threat of Strahd on the horizon, who you can go to at any time at his castle, but you know if you're not prepped, you're gonna die.
But that's such
Yeah.
a like games like Tears of the Kingdom and shit like that. Like a lot of new age RPGs are taking from TTRPGs and making that a thing. So
Yeah.
like that could be possible nowadays. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
well, and
fighting
I'll be
the boss in
honest.
the beginning and trying it, and get your ass
Yeah.
kicked because obviously you're gonna lose. But yeah.
I'll be honest, I really, especially because like, Baldur's Gate 3 is a huge game, and that's great. And Curse of Strahd is kind of meant to be, as odd as it sounds, kind of an introductory game. Your characters come in between levels 1 to 3 into Barovia, and you go through the whole thing, and then it literally at the end gives you the option to go on to nearly any other module, and then potentially come back with the knowledge. Be careful, spoilers of Curse of Strahd here, blah, blah, blah. With the knowledge that Strahd's not gone forever. And so it would actually, to me, be pretty easy for, like, obviously not easy like game development wise, but Larian could even make a DLC for Baldur's Gate 3 that is Curse of Strahd, where your character gets plunged into Barovia, and it's a like just Act 1 sized adventure. I think that would even be doable.
It's funny because the game, I'm not sure if anyone is aware, if you guys are aware, the game in Baldur's Gate 3 here takes place after the current adventure lines that are going on. Like the storyline takes place after Descent into Avernus and Chult.
Yeah, and all those.
Yeah, so canonically, you could do a game that takes place after Curse of Strahd, with him coming back, the looming threat even.
Or again, if they really wanted to, just plunge your characters in now, or just make it a completely separate event. It's a DLC for Baldur's Gate 3, but it's its own adventure.
The before and after, right? Like you can kill him.
You definitely could do that.
Yeah, like Act 1, you could even end up killing him. Act 2, you go somewhere else. Act 3, you come back. Yeah,
the return of Strahd.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I've learned from the modding community, like with Skyrim stuff, they'll try to force another game entirely into it. It would be cool if you could do modular stuff where you have much like a D&D campaign. You do an Act 1 from one game, Act 2 from another, and be able to port them across.
Did you see they have a little bit of compatibility already with that? Did you see when you load up your character, it says what campaign they're in?
Yeah, I did. And it's always like
I know what you're talking about now.
Gustav, right? Or Gustev or something. But yeah, I did see that. But yeah, knowing, like you said, the Skyrim modding community, I mean, I play modded Skyrim a lot. And
there's so many mods.
There's entire new campaigns in the mods. Like it's insane. So knowing like Skyrim kind of being the stepping stone for the entire modding community to get behind and learn how to implement things. Obviously, it's a completely different engine going from, the Skyrim engine to the Baldur's Gate 3 engine, but knowing the framework of making a mod and then just learning how to implement it for each specific thing. I don't think it's long before we start seeing mini, like, here's a new NPC taking you on a quest in Baldur's Gate 3, find them outside the Emerald Grove. And
if there's anybody who wants to implement a new NPC into Baldur's Gate 3, the three of us are all willing to voice act for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So just keep that in mind. If you're an upcoming modder that has a really cool idea,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Hit your boys up.
I wouldn't be surprised if people would recreate entire like modules 1-to-1. They might get a cease and desist, mattering on how WotC's feeling that week, but
it would be
cool to see.
If they don't monetize it, then WotC can't do anything about it. Starfield is currently in a bit of hot water because there's a bunch of sci-fi companies that are really upset because it's a Bethesda game and Bethesda already has the open modding, or at least they're getting it soon. And so like there's already people adding lightsabers and planets like Mustafar and such. So it's not long before we have entire Star Wars video games just within the Starfield engine, because the game's already built to pretty much handle that. So it's like, I don't see that taking a long time. And with that, people could go into Baldur's Gate 3 and add an entire Curse of Strahd line. They could add, God forbid, the Tomb of Horrors into Baldur's Gate 3. And WotC couldn't do anything about it.
And the thing is, too, it's just going to help with the replayability. Like we were talking about early on, like everything from just doing different playthroughs to respeccing and be able to play whatever you want. When people start adding entire mods, I mean, the gameplay is going to be endless. Like, I don't know if you guys think this is game of the year potential.
Oh, yeah.
But I know
100%.
Yeah, the rest of the gaming community, at least like the AAA publishers and stuff, they definitely were complaining like it was game of the year already.
Oh, they weren't just complaining like it was game of the year. I mean, they had the full, like multiple AAA companies getting together to say, hey, gaming fans, gamers alike, this is not the standard for games moving forward.
We know the bar is pretty high right now. You're going to have to lower that real quick.
You have to realize. Okay.
I will interject with something because I saw a lot of that. So there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to that. Because there were a lot of ex-developers that people were saying were currently developers of these games. And so there was a lot of manufactured outrage going on when it came to like, oh, like it's like former Bungie developer says fucking game bad because game too good. And then it turns out this guy worked like as an intern for like 2 months at Bungie and then got fired or something.
He took out one trash bag.
Yeah, I brought out a trash bag once and I couldn't even do that right, and then they fired me. You know, and it's like, yeah, if that person has a take and then it gets framed by like the wider internet community as like, see all these AAA devs, they hate fun. And it's like there are so many things you can make fun of AAA devs for. You know, like you don't have to make shit up.
No, that's exactly it. I was always there for the memes, but yeah, some people are definitely taking the words of like you said, like interns.
Yeah, like interns or like I was a dev for 1 month and then I quit, like or got fired or something. It's like, like people would take those people's words as if those were the gospel of the company themselves. I think personally, those companies are taking notes, and I think they should.
Oh yeah.
Because what this means for them is that means they could run with smaller development teams that are more focused to make better games. You know, I've seen this meme go around, and I unironically believe in it. I want worse games made by smaller groups of people who get paid more.
Oh, yeah.
Or, I mean, I guess I want shorter games.
Yeah, not
I
worse,
want shorter
but...
games. Yeah, I want shorter games made by small groups of people who get paid more. And I unironically believe that. Like,
I don't
we
want
can
just
get
the Call of Duty copy paste number 16. I don't want that.
Yes.
I want, hey, this is a Call of Duty game that is an entirely unique story that takes place back during the Revolutionary War, and good luck. Like,
imagine how wild that could actually end up being. That could actually be unironically a fun game.
And I think people forget that maybe just because of like all these like open world concepts, like indie games, the reason a lot of them get popular is they're only usually good at one or two things, but they do that thing really well.
But anyway, back to Barovia. Yeah, I think that would be a really cool expansion or separate game. I mean, there's a lot of really cool ones. You could do Barovia, you could do Cholt, you could do all kinds of things and just do an entire game set within that setting.
I think what could be cool too with like, have you seen some of the older D&D games that took place within the Domains of Dread? Like William SRD, friend of the show, William SRD.
Friend of the show.
He covered Stone Prophet, which took place in, I think it was like Amonkhet or something like that. Not Amonkhet. I'm pretty sure that's the MTG setting, but it was like it was like an Egyptian themed kind of setting that was one of the Domains of Dread. Yeah, it was cool shit, and like I would love to see.
What was Dark Sun?
Oh,
Dark Sun is the old school D&D
Dark Sun's a different one.
Desert setting.
Yeah, it's like the
I don't know if that's what you were talking about, but
no, it was a different one. Stone Prophet's in a different setting, but
okay.
I do see what you're saying though with Dark Sun though, that could also be a cool setting. But like, yeah, this one was one of the Domains of Dread, so it's like in the like Shadowfell.
Okay, yeah.
But it was like that is something though I would like to see redone and reimagined, because from what I saw with those videos,
Domains of Dread.
Oh yeah, the other Domains of Dread aside from Barovia. Yeah,
because there's so many more than Barovia. I mean, hell, the Van Rieken's Guide to Ravenloft has, I think is that book, literally has a section dedicated to how to make your own Domain of Dread for your campaign. Because the whole point is they're all pockets of reality within, the whole it's not the Shadowfell, I don't think, but it might be the Shadowfell. But basically, one of those like dreadful planes of existence. The domains of dread are all little pockets, little bubbles, and some of them are really, really small, and some of them are huge. And like Barovia is a decent sized one, but the whole point is each domain of dread is typically tied to a person who kind of rules over it or is
Yeah,
trapped
the dark
there.
powers.
Right.
Exactly, the dark powers are influencing that domain of dread, and it is built around that one figure. So that's why Barovia being isolated, it didn't used to be isolated in the domain of dread, but it is now, and that's built around Strahd. And so it basically has guides how you can do that, either just for your setting or how you can twist your game and build a little bubble in that plane that is your player's own domain of dread. And I think that's really cool.
That definitely is cool.
I'm gonna look at different domains of dread that are here. What was it called again? I'll find it. It was
I'll
find it later.
There were
I'll
some.
find it
There
later.
was one that
There's
I read
so
that,
many of
like,
them.
belonged to a witch, and it was literally just like her witch's hut in a small area, but it was
Yeah.
all sorts of fucked up horror and things like that.
I like the other one was Agarath, where it was like contained within the hilt stone of like a magic dagger, and like the people slain by the dagger end up in this place. Is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. The classic kind of soul collector type
Mhm.
weapon.
Harakir, that was the one that William SRD covered. Harakir,
Okay.
ruled by the mummy lord Anktapat.
Well, now I'm going to have to go watch that video, as are you guys, podcast viewers. Go support friend of the channel, William SRD.
Something so you could consider doing. It could be kind of cool, and check it out, see what happens. Maybe you'll like it. You will like it.
You will.
You
like
will
it.
like it. You will like it.
This is a threat.
You will like it.
Well, since we're trailing off, I think this is a good enough place to end the first episode. We've got a few things we want to cover in the next one, but we can leave those for then. We're going to start our wonderful segment of who's got the outro, in which we're going to roll a die and see who gets stuck with reading the outro. Since I did the intro, I am exempt from this game, unfortunately for you two.
Yes.
So, Crowe, high or low?
High. Whoever rolls high, they get to do the outro.
Or are you both
Right,
rolling?
So you ready? Yeah, we're both gonna roll.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, whoever gets the higher number.
Let me get my loaded dice out real
Ready?
quick.
Yeah, you
Oh,
fucker.
yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a D20, right?
Yeah, we're
Oh,
doing that
absolutely.
D20. We're doing the classic. Are you ready? I
Yeah.
won't roll until you roll.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
All right. I got a
14.
14. No.
Oh,
No,
God.
no way.
All right. We're going to have to go again.
Okay. That's
the
insane.
the odds of that.
All right. Let's try again. Right, 1, 2, and 3.
12.
3. Looks like you
Ooh.
go, sir.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the Definitely Not a Mimic channel we have here and stick around to catch more episodes. And you can go check out our individual channels. On the homepage, we actually have like playlists dedicated to some of our best works. And this has been Luke Goblin. Thank you for stopping by. We'll see you in the next one.
And this has been Jacob Crowe. Thank you for stopping by.
And this has been Zill from the Twisted Pint Tavern. Thank you for stopping by.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go. Episode 1 done.